little story time video, I guess. I don't know. So this was a story of it's hard to talk about it because I think there are underlying emotions and feelings that still resonate within me, but at the same time, I don't quite acknowledge them as truth just because they were kind of fabricated in a way. But I guess I just want to kind of talk about some of my relationships and sort of my journey with those and everything that I might have learned or not learned from those. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint because I think commitment is always a determiner of a relationship in people's minds, but I feel relationships just happen. If you have a prolonged interaction with someone and there's an exchange of conversation and energy and time, it's a relationship. It doesn't have to be quote unquote commitment as if that changes anything. It's just, I think, if you're spending time with someone and you're planning with someone, you're committed. It's not you get to decide when you are or aren't. It's a silly idea to me. But I think I always was dabbling and getting sort of head over heels with people all throughout life. I mean, who doesn't? But I think the only time I really started experiencing an interest in relationships was when I was 14, 15, pretty natural, but I wasn't really interested in pursuing things. I think I had crushes and would kind of idealize the idea of a relationship, but I never had a deep interest in them until high school is when I was maybe I need this, and I never really got it until sophomore-ish year, junior year. Met this lady at the time. They were a vibe. I mean, we got along really well. We pretty much spent our time walking, journaling, exploring, and just being intimate, I guess, to some degree. That relationship for me was fucked up on my part because I looked at it more of a trial thing, more of I'm gonna see what this feels like, and I ended up hurting someone a lot, and it didn't really occur to me until they vocalized that, and I still regret that a lot because at this time I was openly bisexual. I hadn't really understood a lot about gender identity at this point, and I was pretty much just open within my sexuality, and any thought of gender construct wasn't really happening with me. And so this relationship lasted for quite some time. I think that it got awkward and weird for me when I heard about sort of how they navigated their own sexual or intimate life beforehand. I think it was just kind of too much of a crossover, too many people that I knew, too many friends, too many things that were you spend a lot of time with these guys, and I have no problem with that, but it's just the fact that I'm hearing stories from XYZ and you're not telling me these stories, and I'm investing so much of myself into this, and I feel yes, our relationship is reciprocal, but this is also just strange. I think towards the end of our relationship, this is when they came out to me as non-binary. Again, the concept was very new to me, and so I did my best to adapt and to understand it and to hear how they understood that for themselves, and really try to love this new person that they were becoming. But I think something that was challenging for me is I kind of adopted more of a masculine persona, and I think that through this, not that I'm not attracted to non-binary people, I think that through my masculinity, if I want to be with someone else, it almost has to be someone more masculine than me, if that makes sense. And I think that their masculinity was not something that in their transition I was attracted to anymore. And that became really difficult for me because I didn't know how to express that. And I think that, they had taken some time, they went away for summer, and I could just feel them becoming a new person. And I was like, I don't hate that you're becoming a new person, but this isn't the person that I fell in love with, you know what I mean? This isn't the person that I felt like I was committed to and that I saw a future with. And it's not to say that I don't support you in your journey and want to see you thrive and become who you are, but this isn't what I had in mind, And I think that whole process taught me a lot. Because who am I to sit here and tell you how to dress yourself or how to explore who you are and be who you are? I have no right to do that. So it ended up getting weird just because there were a lot of talks of like other people that they'd be around, and they like say that they were scared of me meeting so and so because they thought I'd like them more, and I was like, okay, well, I might. But I was just kind of like, this is not working out right now. So it was a text breakup, but they were also in a secluded forest, and I was losing my mind. So I'm not super happy about that, but we ended up seeing each other again throughout the halls senior year, and it was like pretty much as awkward to not awkward as it gets. They found their group, they got with someone pretty much right after that, and I kind of was just like, alright, cool. During that time, I wanted to pursue another relationship, but I was just like, nah, I don't even care anymore. So after that, after sort of scavenging the internet and getting on dating apps and stuff, I met one person that I particularly felt a very bad gut feeling about, to the point of like I'm meeting this guy and like my stomach is dropping. I'm like, ooh, this is gonna be so bad. But I was also in college and hated it and would do anything not to have my mind on it. So it kind of immediately was like an unhealthy escaping coping mechanism. But at the same time, I got a sense of like, you give me a really bad gut feeling, but for some reason I feel like we could be friends. And I think that was a very one-sided thought. I think for this person, it wasn't that at all. I think they were really fastly looking for a rebound after their past relationship. And, when I met them, I didn't really care who they'd been with, but it seemed like this person was still present in his life. And so, naturally one gets curious, and I'm looking at this person and I'm like, oddly familiar taste. Although I wouldn't reckon that we're the same people whatsoever. But there was kind of this perceived fetish that I felt like I was receiving. And they disclosed a lot of like pretty gruesome and dark shit with me, just kind of like recovering from certain things in their personal life, which put them in no position to be a caretaker or lover to anyone, mind you. But for some reason, because the spew of information of, hey, this is where I'm at, deal with it, was like so snappy and quick, I was just like, oh wow, what a vulnerable thing. He must really want this. And I was wrong. Was very wrong. I let him into my life pretty fast. I think like faster than anyone else, but also I think having just had a relationship that was pretty much wires crossed, it didn't feel that off for me. But we spent a lot of time together. Like, at least in my book, I think we spent way too much time together. It was texting every day, paragraphs every minute. Where are you? How are you? What are you doing? Da 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 da. I mean, just texting the text. You know what I mean? It starts out, or at least it started out very cute and endearing, and we were getting to know each other. But I think like in person, it felt like there was such a disconnect where I was like, I'm getting this energy from you offline, or like through text, or like through Instagram, or through social media, and there's just so much of this, quote unquote love bombing, or just these exchanges, and in person it's almost as if there's nothing. And I'm like, that parallel of waking up to paragraphs and all these lovely messages, to being in person with him, and wanting to understand what his life was, and wanting to meet his friends, and kind of wanting to get a bigger scope for who he was. There was such a huge boundary, that I wasn't allowed to cross. And I thought, why is it that you can see everything happening in my world, and I show you no hesitance, and any slightly prying or detecting question I pursue is somehow not allowed. It sent me into like a really, really deep anxiety, because this was also when, ironically, I was exploring my gender identity, and I was more curious about what that meant for me, and I was exploring, different like styles of expression, and messing around with my art and my fashion. This was really an experimental phase for me, in terms of who I was, but my sexuality pretty much remained the same. I didn't really have a change in that ever, but yeah, I think it was moments where we would be in public together where I began to feel like maybe I should get out of this. Not only was it anxiety inducing, but it felt like my mind was caving in on itself. It felt like every time we were together or outside or doing things together, it was like, hey, there's like a billion eyes on us. But also, they don't feel like good eyes. They feel like, girl, what are you doing eyes? And I think that began to feel suffocating. I would like wake up to like panic attacks, and like literally just have like these blackout episodes, and I would be like, hey, like, I'm having these things happen to me, and he'd be like, oh, that sucks. Did you drink water? And I remember I wanted to get to therapy, and I was like, yeah, I just don't have the money for that right now, or at least I don't know how to get that. And he didn't really seem understanding of sort of my own like struggles within like money, and that was difficult because like he was white, and I'm a believer in using white privilege. Any privilege you have, you should use, but I'm not entitled to that. But there were just a lot of moments where I was like, you don't seem to care about my black identity at all, and not in a way that you should over romanticize it or prioritize that. And I'm more to that. I'm more than that. But it was just like there was no regard for the fact that yes, in the world we are going to be treated differently. And I think that's always something I've been very aware of, and that disconnect was really challenging. I remember like, asking around, asking my friends, like, hey, like, what do you think of this guy? Like, I can't understand the situation. It was a constant like headache all this time. There was like a new segment of a new problem, every week or month or day. It was just like constant, and I was always trying to figure it out, and I'd always be the one to like bring it up and bring up the conversations. And I remember it got to a point where it felt patronizing, where it was like I'm doing like all the heavy lifting in this right now, and he was just there, just waiting and watching and just being like, wow, you really know how to navigate this. And it got to a point where I was like, all right, something's actually happening right now, because it's like some people do have a hard time being alone, and I think for me it's like I never want to be your like dependent person. I would never be that to anyone, because it's not healthy for me, it's not healthy for you. And I remember a lot of the time, like his friendships and sort of how they appeared to me were, I could never say too much because I wasn't allowed in the mix. But that was really hurtful, to feel excluded in that way, because I'd never been a person who excluded anyone. I was always the person who would see someone at a lunch table sat alone and I'd sit with them or invite them, or I never want to make people feel excluded. I'm always bringing people into the mix. And I think like even with sex, it was just like, I mean, it was something I wanted deeply, but also I was incredibly depressed at the time. So it was kind of like the one thing in the world that I felt could fix me. Obviously not, but it was kind of that for me. But that ended quickly, and we pretty much were just like make out buddies progressively throughout time. And that even became weird because it was like, even with just kissing, I was like, you don't seem like you want this right now. And I remember there's one day we went thrifting and he went to this Valentine's Day party, and that was like the day where I was like, oh my god, I think this is over. Because there were so many other days where it felt like he was slowly chipping away at my hope for us working out. Instead of just being like, hey, full halt, this is, how I feel about us, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, what are your thoughts? It was always sort of like an elusive way of conversation, just enough to keep me there until he found the next one. And the next one was, someone in his sort of group, his dynamic. And, I think it bothered me, not because it happened, but because this was a white woman, completely different from me, almost similar styles or aesthetics, if you will. But it was just like women essentially found a white clone version of me, and that made me feel like, okay, so it's just because I'm black, you know what I mean? And not that I want to go to there, but it was like, I mean, how else do you explain something like that, you know what I mean? I think especially with like, he was boastful of like his past relationships being people of color, and I was like, okay, well, clearly you didn't fucking learn a thing, because that's crazy. That's fucking crazy. So yeah, I guess it was a progressive heartache. I mean, like, it was happening the whole time, but I think once I saw that, and essentially it was kind of like pushing for like a friendship, if not a relationship, it was like this constant back away from me, And I remember just hoping that I was gonna spend a summer with someone, and just being completely exiled from someone's life, and watching this from afar, and just being astonished, honestly, being highly just impressed to some degree, because I'm like, wow, that is some serious something. Don't know what, but yeah, after that, I just kind of let it go. I was like, you know what, he told me off, and I was like, fine, I'll go figure myself out. Had a interesting round with that, kind of ended up in another shitty thing, but wasn't the worst, wasn't the best, hey. Yeah, ended up running into him again, and pretty much the same dude. Didn't really give a shit, but super interesting stuff. And since then, pretty much just been chiming into myself and focusing on my journey.